Okay. I'm going to call this meeting to order, Community Infrastructure Service Committee. Do I have a mover on the consent items? Councillor Fernandez. Any questions? All those in favor? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have two delegations on tap today. There isn't any formal presentation by staff, so with that, I like to call upon Brad Clark and Dan Provost from the KW Badminton Club. Welcome.
Okay. Hello, my name is Brad Clark. I'm the president of the KW Badminton Club in Kitchener. This is my vice president, Dan Pronovost. That's how you say it. Pronovost. Our presence here is twofold. We're here as part of a group becoming affiliated with the City of Kitchener Community Services. But we're also here to announce that we have some very special news. We've purchased our property, and through a lot of countless hours and lots of hard work, and by Dan and myself especially, and the full board of directors, we've made this wonderful accomplishment. Dan has a presentation now.
Good afternoon, councillors. I'd like to begin by thanking Councillor Etherington and Bob Shane and Denise Keelan from the Community Services Department for all of their help over the last few months to our club. I'll begin with a brief history of our club for those who might not be familiar with us. We've been here in Kitchener for 80 years, located at 69 Agnes Street. Many of you may know that property is the old Granite Club. 10 years ago, when the curling club left to relocate into Waterloo, the building was purchased by its current owner, who runs the paintball arena, it's a paintball field, and we then switched over to a lease arrangement and have done so for the last 10 years. Our badminton club is a non-profit incorporation, and our goal and mandate is to see the development and improvement of recreational and competitive badminton in the region. We have over 400 members, and we've had over 400 members for many years. In other words, we're a very viable, very successful, and very growing club. So, developments changed a couple of years ago for us, requiring our board to make some decisions. Basically, the owner of the building was looking to retire from the paintball business, we were told, and so he listed the building for sale in 2011. The last asking price was $1.15 million, which is a lot, but then again, we're right in the city core, right near the LRT and the hub, so it was a high value. So our board had to make a difficult decision about our long-term strategy for our club. Do we continue to lease? Do we move to a different location? Do we lease at a different location? Do we try to buy this building or buy a different building? So we did a lot of soul searching, did a lot of budgets and analysis and fiscal prudence, looked at it and decided the best option for the club would be to try to purchase this building, the building that we continue to operate at, but at a reasonable price. Along those lines then, we had to make some plans. So the good news is, to buy a building of this nature, our club has been very fiscally prudent for many years, for the last 10 years in particular, and we've saved up over $250,000 cash to save for a rainy day, and that rainy day is now. We have a very strong financial history. We've been in operation 80 years, very strong NPO, absolutely no debt. And so we had no problem securing a private mortgage through our bank towards this purpose. Our long-term strategy then was to buy the building, renovate it and update it, because it was certainly, as an old building and the condition of the other side where the paintball was run is poor, add some sport tenants, and then ultimately double our own capacity from 6 courts to 12. So I'm very pleased to announce to Council that we have in fact purchased the building. We take possession on the 29th, and our plans are to effectively renovate and improve the building, which will happen up until early to late spring 2014, so the next 4 or 5 months. The main issue being the roof. The roof is in need of some repairs, so we will be doing that. Till that time, the building will remain empty. As far as our club is concerned, though, it will be business as usual. Our building is functionally separate other than a small entrance area, and we've always kept our building in good shape. We replaced the roof a number of years ago, insulated it, heated. There's no issues with our side whatsoever. So it will be business as usual. So we're here today officially for the process of seeking affiliation with the city, but really that's a foundation for something we see as an excellent win for everyone. It's a win for the city in that we can build a multi-sport center that services the community. It's a win for our club so that we can grow ourselves as well and add more badminton because we are very, very busy. Our courts are packed every night. And it's a win for the members of the community to have more sports services. I'll premise this by saying we are not looking for money, not a dime. We don't want any money or financial support from council or for the city whatsoever. We don't need it. We have all our plans in place. So that's not what we're here for today, and it will not be what we're here for in the future. We have full support from the local CPNA, Cherry Park Neighborhood Association, who have given us written and verbal endorsement for our plans for the building to turn it into a multi-sport center and facility that Kitchener can be proud of, and they love the idea of seeing this land used this way instead of, say, torn down and turned into some high-rise or something like that. As far as our affiliation goes, we're very excited about this and having that opportunity to become affiliated. It will really allow us to leverage the expertise of people like Denise and Bob and others within the Community Services Department as we go from just running a badminton club under lease to having a full building with a multi-sport center and other sports tenants. But also very important, it will allow us to raise charitable donations for corporations and individuals alike through the city's excellent program that it makes available to us. As we're an MPO, we're not a charity, that's an excellent vehicle to do so. Brad and I would be very happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you for that. We do have a few questions. Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I was just going to say I'm really delighted to see this taking place. I'd be prepared to move this in the interest of time. Just one question I wanted to ask about what other sports groups have shown an interest in the building?
Sure. We've had dealings with one group already, the Excelsior Fencing Club, and we've got a letter of intent with them signed and sealed. Well, not sealed, but obviously we can't seal anything yet. We can't do up a contract yet. We don't have a building. But strong desire by them to get a dedicated space that they can use for their fencing activities. We have had inquiries from different groups, some through realtors, so we don't know who they are yet. But we've had lots of interest, almost daily. People are calling or emailing.
That's great.
There's a great shortage of space, we're told, and we've learned from many groups, both in the city and outside, for sports space. So it's quite incredible the number of people that have come forward looking for dedicated space who are renting space, say, in a church basement, and they just can't get that kind of thing. They need that step up. We really see our facility as filling a gap for people like that. And we have a lot of space. We have 45,000 square feet in this building.
Thank you very much. And as I said, I'd be prepared to move.
Yes, one time. Just have a few more questions. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a question to staff after. Just a quick, about 500 years ago, I used to belong to the badminton club. Just as an NPO, do you have to pay property taxes?
Yes.
Yes.
You do. You're not exempt that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. I want to congratulate you. Just took me off.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to congratulate you on a great business case. It's clear that you were prepared for an opportunity and you seized it, so that's great. What other activities and sports do you see that could be fitting in with this facility?
That's a good question. Well, the fencing club fits well in the sense that they're looking for about 5,000 square feet, and there's a section that will partition off for them. Table tennis club apparently is another club that is, again, struggling with non-dedicated basement church kind of space and has expressed an interest. Girls Baseball Association, I'm afraid I don't know officially which one, but one of them has approached us saying, hey, we love winter training space. And we've had a number of different groups talk about winter athletic training space. And again, we have a number of building sections within the building. Even already, we have something that's effectively a gym with a hardwood floor that's still there right now. So it will be a number of clubs of that nature. Ones that might not be a great fit, for example, like beach volleyball, which will require a tremendous amount of re-architecting, may not be a good fit. Soccer, I don't think we have the amount of space for an indoor soccer field. But clubs of that nature that require slightly smaller, say 5,000 square feet and less, or a gym space, or even hourly rentals.
Okay. Consider pickleball. It's an up-and-coming sport, and I
Yes,
love it.
Absolutely. We're very familiar
I
with
think
it.
it fits well with the courts,
does.
fits well with the nets and the whole business. So
does.
great. Well, congratulations. I look forward to hearing more about it.
That's all the questions. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I would just be prepared to move the recommendation as it is on the staff report. Top 2 paragraphs. Do you want me to read it?
Go ahead. Quickly, please.
That the Kitchener-Waterloo Badminton Club be approved as an affiliated minor sport group with the City of Kitchener per Council Policy 1-471, minor sport affiliation, and that the Kitchener-Waterloo Badminton Club be added as an insured group to the City of Kitchener's minor sports third-party liability insurance program.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola, you have a questions or comments?
I have a question of staff.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, in the report, it says that 164 of the 412 participants are from Kitchener. I take it the rest are not from Kitchener or from Waterloo or?
Through the chair, the balance of players are mainly from Waterloo.
You can't hear me or her? Either one of us.
Through the chair, the balance of players are from mainly Waterloo and I think a small percentage from non-KW.
The 412, are those youth?
No, that's the total. That's the total membership. I think the youth were in the 200 range.
Like our affiliation relates to youth, right? It doesn't
Correct.
relate to the whole, yeah. And that's all I want. So they are, the main factor here is that they're covered for liability insurance, right? Is that?
Through the chair, along with our policy, they would be covered under our third-party liability, yes.
Just the youth, not the whole badminton club,
That is correct.
right? Okay. How does Waterloo fit into it now? Do they participate in that coverage or?
Can you clarify that question?
Well, how does Waterloo fit into the picture? You're covering all of the young people that play badminton under our minor sports umbrella. How does that work for the people that are from Waterloo? Does Waterloo share in this?
Go ahead, Mr. Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the coverage covers not specifically the players, but it also covers the executive employees, volunteers of the club in their role. So in the role of, much like all other KW affiliated groups, the executive is covered in their role, and the volunteers are covered in their role as it pertains to operating the club.
No, and I agree, and I understand that. Okay. Being on the other end of it. I just want, does Waterloo, though, share in this, in the cost for this coverage?
So,
There's obviously, and I'm not arguing about it, I don't want to change, but there's obviously an insurance cost for liability insurance.
Yes.
And
Through
it's a KW thing, so is Waterloo sharing in it? Like, what happens with KW track and field? That's another organization like this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that the club has not applied for affiliation through Waterloo just yet. So I'm not sure if they're planning on doing that. So if they're covered through the City of Waterloo, they do have their own coverage, I believe, of sports organizations.
So that's what they would normally do then?
That's right.
We would cover, I realize we cover the executive and the board, but I thought we would limit that to the Kitchener players as opposed to both Kitchener and Waterloo. I'll leave that with you, okay?
Councillor Yaneski, do you have any questions or comments?
Just further to Councillor Gazzolo's question about the coverage, I think maybe a similar situation would be maybe the KW Skating Club that's located at the Rim, and even though it's referred as KW, again, maybe they're covered by policies and insurance on an equal basis for Kitchener residents or kids that are performing. That be sort of a similar type of scenario setup?
Mr. Hilbrand?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that the only difference is that the KW Skating Club is affiliated with the City of Waterloo. This group is not yet affiliated with the City of Waterloo.
Okay. Are they going to be? Oh.
Through the chair, the club has indicated that they do plan to go to Waterloo Council and request affiliation at some point in the future.
Okay, appreciate that. The one question that sort of puzzles me is that they've been offering badminton programs for over 80 years, and yet they've never been affiliated with anybody. I just assumed that for all those years they would have been affiliated. Or is there a reason maybe that they weren't, or they couldn't meet certain criteria, or what?
That would be a question for them.
Asking the question to the wrong people.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Hi, Mr. Pronovo.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to answer that question. It's a very good question, Councillor Yaki. The only reason we haven't is there hasn't really been any incentive to us since we have been doing fine. In terms of our financial operations, we've been aware of the program to date, and we've certainly brought it up at our board meeting several times. And the answer was, well, you know, there's a little bit of finances for programming, I guess, and there's a few things here like that, and we can accept charitable donations, but at that time we didn't need it until we've decided for this very big plan. So we've always recognized the value and the potential, but to be blunt and honest, it was almost out of laziness that we haven't. We absolutely intend to apply to Waterloo as well, and we look forward to doing that as well. It's very recent that these building plans presented themselves as a realistic opportunity, as the current owner finally responded to us in very short order and asked for a very short close. So primarily it was the charitable donations that have brought us here today, that affiliation provides that benefit. And so that's why we haven't done it to date. I should also point out that we also have our own insurance for the building, and we also have insurance that's provided through OBA. So a lot of the questions in regards to liability and coverage for members, we have 3 levels of insurance that provide it. That's not one of the primary motives that brought us to the affiliation.
So while you're up there, just one final question then. When the city sports people have their annual promotion of registration in the early winter part in February, usually for summer programs and stuff like that. Are you? I guess you're not part of that in terms of trying to encourage them to come and solicit new members and stuff like that to join up.
Not yet, but we're sure looking forward to it. The reality is right now we have 400 members and 6 courts. That's 3 times higher member-to-court ratio than any other club in Southern Ontario. We have people lined up waiting like half an hour to an hour to play every night, 7 days a week, and the courts are busy for more than 12 hours a day. We haven't had a lot of reason to go out and get members. The number of members, I know it sounds crazy, but we literally have members who show up and join going, I didn't even know this was here. And we haven't had to advertise. Yeah. So it might seem silly that we haven't applied for affiliation. It's because we haven't really had the incentive and the plans to really leverage growing our membership. We're very excited to add 6 more courts, and we can fill those right away. I can get us up to 500, 600, 700 members within a small number of years. But we need those courts.
Well, congratulations on such a success story.
Thank you.
Okay. So then we have no more questions. I'll call this to a vote. All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Congratulations, gentlemen, and look forward to exciting times for the KW Badminton Club. Next item up on the agenda is Community Climate Action Plan and Corporate Greenhouse Gas Reduction Initiatives. And we have Mr. Mike Maurice from Climate Action Waterloo Region here to speak as a delegation, but Mr. Sloan will give us a little bit of an update. Go ahead, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you and good afternoon. This report is a positive step forward for Kitchener in our FCM Partner for Climate Protection program. Kitchener is one of the leaders in reducing our ecological footprint. We have an obligation to follow through with a community and corporate action plan to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The focus of today's presentation is primarily going to be on the Community Climate Action Plan that was prepared in a collaborative process, and Mike will present that in a moment. Briefly, to take you through the report recommendation that's before you, this recommendation is also before the cities of Waterloo, Cambridge, and the region, in addition to Kitchener. And in fact, Waterloo and Cambridge have already passed a resolution similar to this. This is a collaborative process. What you'll see in the recommendation is a lot of wording that is kept similar to those other municipalities for consistency purposes. There's also a clause that is requesting an endorsement of a 6% reduction by the year 2020 for greenhouse gas emissions. There's also a clause about endorsing the plan in principle, and the actions that are within it would be subject to the typical budget and corporate business planning processes. And there's also a clause about our corporate steps, because the Federation of Canadian Municipalities has acknowledged the city of having an inventory, and now we need to move forward with having our other actions to be recognized by FCM. And so that's recommended to be referred to our corporate business planning process. The Environmental Committee has reviewed and discussed this and have endorsed moving forward with the recommendation here to committee and on to council. And probably the best would be to hear from Mike about the presentation, and then we could have some jointly share any answers to questions. Thanks.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. For those I've not met before, my name is Mike Morris. I'm the Executive Director at Sustainable Waterloo Region. Today I'm before you on behalf of the Climate Action WR Steering Committee, of which there are 3 of us, and Mary Jane Patterson from REAP Green Solutions is also on that steering committee, as is David Roade, Sustainability Planner at the region, who's also here. Today also we have a number of folks who are supporting this particular item, and for those that are here supporting, if you could please raise your hands. Thank you. One person not here today that some of you are familiar with is Sarah Brown, the project manager of this project for the past 3 years now. She's in Poland at the UN climate on negotiations, and so I'm here in her place. So on behalf of others that are supporting climate action and the steering committee, it is actually really great to be back. This is a significant milestone in this project, and now 3 years in, really good to be here. And so this is Waterloo Region's first ever climate change plan. It was developed as a platform that will support and further advance meaningful climate change action that's already occurring across Waterloo Region. It's based on the conviction that communities have an important role to play in climate change, where we have direct or indirect control over 44% of Canada's greenhouse gas footprint. And that we have 240 communities across Canada also participating in a similar process to look at setting targets on community-wide carbon footprint. The scope of this plan is threefold, and is on this slide before you. We're talking about mitigation, that is reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and not climate change adaptation, while that is also important and a concurrent work that is happening. It applies to initiatives that are under our local control, and third, it's a fairly short time frame. These are actions and a target that applies before 2020. And so it really represents a first step in our community's transition towards a low-carbon economy. To speak to the collaborative process that Brandon had mentioned already, we've heard from FCM there are two elements of what's been done over the past 3 years that are particularly innovative to call to your attention. The first is that we have all 3 cities and the region together putting in place one unified comprehensive plan. The second is that it's not just the municipalities working towards this, but that REAP Green Solutions and Sustainable Waterloo Region have been involved from the very start. What this means is then that the actions and programs that are in the Climate Action Plan are not only on the shoulders of municipalities, but you'll see listed there are literally dozens of others from groups across Waterloo Region. In addition, it's allowed us to share information and resources that no one community could have done on their own. One financial example of this, for every dollar that the City of Kitchener has contributed towards putting in place this Climate Action Plan over the last 3 years, there's been $44 of external resources brought from the grantors and partners you see on this slide here. And so to speak briefly to the engagement, there's a large cross-section of the community involved. The one I'll speak to briefly are our task forces. We had 5 of these groups from every sector of the economy, helping give a sense to really ground the actions that are in the plan. Again, 5 groups, 45 people, 28 organizations, Kitchener Utilities, City of Kitchener, the Car Share, the School Board, the Chamber of Commerce, a fairly wide mix. To again ground back in the Partners for Climate Protection process that Brandon had mentioned, this council supported working towards the inventory and forecast in May of 2012. And over the past year, we've now put ourselves in a position to request your support, along with staff, for milestones 2 and 3, that is the target and the action plan for our community-wide climate action. By approving this recommendation, you'll then receive appropriate recognition for FCM of completion of milestones 2 and 3. Milestones 4 and 5 are then implementation and reporting back, and that would happen until 2020. And so, to ground us in the inventory that's been completed, this slide gives you a sense of it. 3.6 million tons is Waterloo Region's community-wide carbon footprint. Again, this is for the geographic area of Waterloo Region, as well as a breakdown of where those emissions come from. This gives us a sense of where we stand, which then gives a meaningful grounding point to talk about where action can take place. The inventory does a second thing. It also gives us a forecast. If we did nothing, what happens? Our emissions go up by 17.5% until 2020. As a result of all the engagement over the past 3 years, the action plan identifies opportunity to now set a target to reduce by 6% below 2010 levels by 2020. So I want to pause here and talk about the process of setting that target. It's one that we spent a lot of time in, a lot of conversations with politicians from all area municipalities, with staff, with those task forces. And what we heard time and again is a need to balance what is achievable, that is what we already know is on the books already, with a little bit of innovation, a little bit of ambition to say we can't simply approve a plan with everything that we're already doing. And so this then got us to the 6% target, with a large majority of actions of which were already on the books, and then a little push to go beyond that to get this balance between ambition and achievability. And again, to Brandon's point, this target was approved by both Cambridge and Waterloo 2 weeks ago. It's also consistent with targets that other municipalities across Canada have set over the past couple of years, and to translate that into some metrics, it is equivalent to reducing about 256,000 tons of greenhouse gas across Waterloo Region and taking 57,000 cars off our roads every year. Now, in terms of what's actually in the plan, we've provided an initial list of the types of projects and initiatives that we've heard from this community, and we've separated them into 3 buckets that I'll briefly outline for you. The first we call actions. These are programs already underway with a lead partner already moving them forward. Things like community car share and conservation programs from our local utilities. We then also heard a number of opportunities. These are not in place yet, but they have lead partners who've said we want to move this forward. We want to talk about district energy or green building standards, and so we've documented those in this plan. Then third, we heard about some great ideas that didn't have a lead partner yet. We didn't want to lose track of, and so those are then captured in the future considerations list of the plan. To underscore again, though, each of these actions and opportunities will each be approved by the lead agencies separately over the life of this plan. And so before you today is not an approval of every action in that list, but rather an approval of the overall target and framework. And these actions are meant to give you a sense of, can we do this? Here is exactly how. Now, I also want to underscore again, this is not simply a climate change plan. This is a community development plan. And as we respond to climate change, it is both an economic and a health imperative for us. And so by mitigating the production of greenhouse gas emissions, we'll do other wonderful things, like strengthening our local economy, increasing energy security, investing in reducing the cost of infrastructure, and improving public health. We thought it was important to really underscore this point. And so we had a third-party professor from York look at just the top 13 actions and opportunities specifically, and specifically comment on the value added to our local economy, jobs created, savings in new tax revenue, and savings from these. And this slide gives you a sense of the results we heard from that third-party study. Now, a plan like this, critical is then implementation. If I mentioned this as a platform, we need to make sure we have actually a clear sense of how to make this all happen. And so for implementation, we talked to a number of other communities across Canada, but then we also spoke with folks in our community to get a sense of what makes sense in Waterloo Region to implement this action plan. The result are these 4 objectives on this slide, the most critical of which is continuing in a collaborative way amongst all 3 area municipalities and the region to consolidate actions towards mitigating the results of climate change, move those actions forward so those opportunities end up getting more research behind them and supporters around them, and then continue to engage the community and report back on the progress made. And so we are really excited about the progress that has been made in Waterloo Region over these last 3 years. And as I stand before you today, to reinforce the weight of this plan is not on any one community's shoulders, but that rather in front of you today is the opportunity to take a leadership role for the City of Kitchener, for its part, to endorse this 6% target. And in doing so, knowing that there's a reciprocal commitment from communities and organizations across Waterloo Region to continue down this path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. We do have some questions. Councillor Verbanovich.
Thanks very much, and thank you for coming in today, Mike, and presenting this. I think without a doubt, congratulations are in order to all of you that have been part of this integral process for so long. And I think particularly important is this collaborative nature that I guess is indicative of Waterloo Region that has been brought together for this initiative. And it wouldn't have happened without a lot of hard work and sweat equity from people like the group that's here today. You just happen to be the spokesperson today, but I really do want to acknowledge all of you. You've talked about balance going forward and coming up with some real successes, but bringing in some innovation and ambition into all of it. It's a fairly ambitious target by 2020. What would you say is our biggest challenge in terms of meeting that target over the next roughly 6 years?
Well, it's a good chance to clarify that balance. The 256,000 tons that are part of that 6% commitment, 2/3 of those are represented by actions that are in fact already underway. And so that balance is 2/3 of things that are already in place and 1/3 of those that we need to continue to move forward. I'd say the biggest challenge would be continuing to really guide down this implementation path. That is, continue working in a collaborative way, maintain the momentum in this community to continue conversations around district energy, around green building standards. If we just sign off on this and all go back to everything else, we will have really lost a lot of the excitement that has been galvanized over the past year. So I'd say the biggest challenge is continuing to ensure that everyone's on the same page, that the community has one unified plan, and that there's one directed support across Waterloo Region to make it really easy for residents and businesses to plug into being a part of the solution to mitigate climate change.
And in terms of sort of the various constituencies that need to be part of this, I mean, you've got citizens, you've got businesses, you've got government, and we know local governments do play a big role or have the ability to influence climate change in a significant way. Do you sense that there's equal buy-in from all three groups in terms of moving forward and tackling that challenge that you just talked about?
Well, I think an evidence of that is that the staff reports going forward to each city council are as similar as they are. That I didn't mention this either, but in the conversations that led to that target, municipal staff from all three cities in the region together are the ones that finally said, yeah, this is the right number for us to go with. And so I've been very encouraged by the extent to which there is consistency between all. And then that puts us in a better position to make it simple to engage those different groups.
Okay, and the last question I have, and you touched on it right at the beginning where you said this report doesn't really get into climate change adaptation issues. From your perspective, when's the time that we should be talking about that, and how does that fit into all of this?
That's a wonderful question. It is an absolutely critical and concurrent priority for this community. There are very few projects in place. I point to REAP's RAIN program on stormwater management as one of the few in this community that's looking at climate change adaptation. And so I would say as soon as possible. Specifically, the financials behind it, we, for just one of the storms from this past summer, and climate change leads to increased storms of those kind. The cleanup of just one of those storms alone was $500,000. The entire process of putting together this climate change action plan over the past 3 years is less than that one storm alone. And so I think it's absolutely critical for us to take a leadership role on climate change adaptation. That has not been funded currently, and it's not currently done in such a consistent way as this. And I'd be very keen to have conversations with the right folks to move that forward separately.
Are the two, is there anything to be gained by doing it together, or are they really two distinct processes?
The more we can mitigate climate change, the less work that then needs to be done to adapt our infrastructure to it. And so ideally, the approach would be to be doing both concurrently. And again, by doing one, you support the other. And of course, the last is then clean up afterwards when you haven't adapted. And that's sort of the last resort.
Great. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, if I can move it when the time comes.
Sure. Councillor Gazzola.
Thank you. This is quite an overwhelming proposition. It was overwhelming just to try and read all 106 pages. I'm really. It just seems there's so much to do. It's hard to understand how you're even making a dent with things. There was a page in there somewhere that showed to come up with the 6%, we have to reduce by 256,000 tons. And then if we do nothing, it goes way up. Does I was curious as to how you came up with 6%. Why 6? Why not 4? Why not 10? What's the basis of that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to address that, and if Brandon wanted to add anything in. I'll go. Sure. So to start, the 17.5% is if nothing happens at all. And so our process to come to the target was to start with conversations with folks like yourselves, and many of you were sat down for group sessions and one-on-ones to get a sense of, generally speaking, what is our approach to setting a target. And that could have been wildly ambitious, it could have been absolutely not, and what we heard time and again in those conversations was, again, this sense of wanting a balance of what is already on the ground and very achievable with what's already right in front of us, with a sense of some level of ambition. And so to bring down from the 17.5, Brandon's pointed out the first step is that we already have coal-fired power plants, for example, other federal and provincial legislation outside of our control that is helping us reduce the impacts of climate change in Waterloo Region. Every 1 kilowatt hour of electricity has a much smaller carbon footprint today than it did 4 years ago because we're phasing out of coal-fired power. And so that gives a huge dent in that to start with. But then more specifically to your question, Councillor Gazzola, to get the 6 opposed to 4 or 10, it started with that overarching mandate from the community of wanting this balance. And then understanding that balance, we then brought that back to staff to have conversations with each of the city to get a sense of what does that quantify then to. And it was in those conversations that 6% emerged as balancing 2/3 of which is already on the books and 1/3 of which the plan is actually quite long, in part because there are so many actions, so many opportunities in front of us. And so from staff's point of view, the sense I got, and Brandon can elaborate, was, wow, there's a lot of opportunity here for us to get that extra one-third. And that, again, balanced us out between what we have in front of us and what the potential is. Again, by 2020, and this is just a starting point.
Yeah, by my count, 2020 is just 6 years.
Yeah.
And we have to reduce by 256,000 tons. What is the figure for our entire country? What are we looking at? And what kind of reduction are we looking at?
I can speak to the first point. Just to clarify that the baseline year being used is actually 2010. So we're not saying we're starting in 2014 and must see 256,000 tons in 6 years. It's 256,000 over the course of 10 years starting in 2010. Off the top of my head, I don't have the Canadian-wide carbon footprint number, but it'd be in the gigatons.
Do we have any indication of whoever the powers to be, what are we trying to reduce across the country? What are our figures?
I think part of what's exciting from my perspective in this is that, again, my first point, that 44% of our emissions are actually under our local control, outside of powers that be outside of Waterloo Region. That while we have negotiations happening in Poland right now on climate change on a global level that's outside of our control completely, here's a community taking a step back, taking 4 years to get a rigorous process that's led to the plan in front of you to say, this is actually what we can do that is in our financial best interest, outside of all those other third-party factors. And I think that's part of what's exciting in this community's opportunity to not sit on the sidelines and sort of wait, but take a leadership role. And I think this represents our first major step down that path.
Just to help supplement the answer to other municipalities that are in the same program, I think they typically have about a 6 to 8%. I think that's the standard that most look at. Some go more ambitious. What Mike outlined is some of the changes that are happening through federal and provincial government and other initiatives. That's going to bring that red line down to the gray line that's on that graph. That's a huge amount already. And what we have to do in this plan is try and do a little bit more. And to be honest, it's actually not that overwhelming because we have this partnership model. So if you look at the actions starting on page 74 of the document, if you add up what is known in the right-hand column, potential GHG reductions, that already gets us to 4% below, if we do those. And when you look at it, the City of Kitchener isn't directly responsible for all of them. It's a whole partnership, and so many others are leading that. There's actually only a few that we may actually be the lead in. What's left is, it's really only about 2% that we haven't quantified in that same list or in the pages that are after that, which are opportunities. So maybe Kitchener wants to pick one other really big initiative. Maybe green building standards or looking into district energy is something really important for us. And maybe that's what we want to pick to move forward to help us get to that other 2%. Maybe 6% isn't even enough, is what some people are saying.
Well, I'm glad you're optimistic, because I looked at it, I said we need to get 256,000 tons, and you have expanded that it's a 10-year period. I said 256,000 tons out of 500,000 people. That's a half a ton a person. And then I looked at what you have to do. You know, a ton is, what is a ton? 56,000 cars off the road?
No, that would be the total of the 256,000.
That's the 256.
Yes.
Well, let me
yes,
go
yes.
back. One page showed a ton was 52 cylinders of propane. So half a person has to get rid of 26. It seems overwhelming.
And I think it could be if the city of Kitchener was on their own.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the point I was meaning to reinforce with Councillor Verbanovich's comments. The critical factor here is for Kitchener not to try to do this alone. That in the implementation work that's been done and the engagement we heard time and again, many of these programs cross across multiple communities. And so we heard it time and again, continue this collaborative approach so that the weight's not on any one community's shoulders. And so that it's so much easier when there's one dedicated resource responsible for continuing this collaborative forward and making it really simple that if someone says we want to look at district energy, great, hop on the bus. There's a lot already happening.
Can I ask you globally, what kind of goals are there? And I ask this because I know there are a lot of countries that are doing nothing, right? Is that, or very little?
Yeah, through the chair, it's a huge topic that you could discuss and debate for a long time. What I would suggest is Kitchener has committed to the FCM program several years ago, and that program recommends typically around 6 to 8%.
Okay, you want me to go away?
Through the chair, the answer, it's a serious matter. Like, we do need to continue to shift. It's not a little bit, but to make long-term gains, we need to start to move forward with some of these initiatives.
Well, that's my concern. It just seems so overwhelming that you really wonder, are you doing any good? You know, and I guess just a couple more quick questions. Where are our 4 rural townships? They don't seem to be at the table. Are they committed or?
Yeah, to close on the last conversation, I think is a really important one. And Councillor Gazzola, if you're interested, I'd be more than happy to have a longer conversation about global climate change and the local versus international response to it. I think it's so critical. We've seen so much more response and benefit at the local level versus international. And I'll point back to this slide around the economic impact locally of taking action on climate change. To the second point around townships, we had several folks participating in task forces throughout the way. A formal endorsement of this kind is not going to townships on their own. However, there are representations at regional council, and that will be in front of regional council on December the 3rd.
Okay, just finally to what kind of now there's a committee, I gather. There's a committee that is set up. That's what this is a committee. Is there who do you answer to?
Great question. I'll go back to this slide around collaboration. So Climate Action WR is a collaboration currently between 3 lead partners. And so I report to a board at Sustainable Waterloo Region that is committed to this program over the past 4 years. Mary Jane Patterson, also on this steering committee, reports to the REAP board, and David Roade from the region is part of one of those 3 lead partners at the region. As well, city staff from Cambridge, Waterloo, and Kitchener have been core to the process throughout over the past 3 years. And so that's the governance structure we've had to date. As part of the implementation strategy moving forward that you see outlined in the second half of the plan, our interest is to continue this through what we're calling a leadership committee with representation from each of the municipalities, the region, REAP Green Solutions, and Sustainable Waterloo Region as well. In essence, an evolution of the first steering committee, now better prepared to help the community move actions forward to meet the 6% goal.
Okay, that's interesting. Again, there has to be somebody in charge, and it appears now there are 3 groups in charge. Or
Through the chair, there have been 3 groups collaboratively, there's a collaborative agreement between those 3 groups. Decision-making finances are all outlined in that agreement, and we will ideally continue that into this new leadership committee, of which the City of Kitchener would also be a part. And we found that to work very, very well for the past 3 years so far.
Okay, up till now, have there been costs that have been incurred, and if so, who looks after that?
So through the chair, the cost to date, as I mentioned, the City of Kitchener has invested $1 for every $44 of third-party support that's gone into this from groups like Trillium, the Community Foundation, and FCM's Green Communities Fund. That has allowed for this collaborative process to get started, for the plan to be created, for all the engagement, and going forward, our intention is to continue that through the implementation strategy to fund a dedicated resource. And I'll let Brendan speak to the details of that.
No, I don't think, the only final close is, are all the parties doing some kind of contribution at this point? It's not just totally the City of Kitchener.
Through the chair, on the first milestone, all the parties contributed equally, the parties that I'm referring to being the municipalities. What that was leveraged for was more money with other partners because we were in that group. Milestones 2 and 3, what we're talking about mainly today, this whole entire action plan, I don't believe Kitchener had to financially contribute anything directly, but just be a partner to that process, which helped with those other funding partners to get those grants. So it's leveraging to a T.
Okay, thank you. Just in close, I do get the feeling, though, that the private sector, maybe you can correct me, that the private sector is not as committed or involved as much as the public sector is. Am I wrong, or?
Yeah, I would disagree with that, in that by our work with the Regional Carbon Initiative, we've now engaged 13% of the workforce in setting targets much like this to reduce their carbon impact. These are companies as large as Sun Life Financial and Home Hardware, and as small as Athena Software. And this, I'd say, is right alongside that. That it's important and important leadership from the City of Kitchener to be walking alongside the private sector's commitments to reduce the impacts of climate change, and it's in their best interest. There's a strong business case for each of those organizations that participate as well. And that is unlike any other community across Ontario to have the private sector setting targets to reduce their carbon impact. And so I think that's another asset that's in the Climate Action Plan. The Regional Carbon Initiative is listed in there, and our hope is to continue to broaden that engagement. And in fact, the city has supported the Regional Carbon Initiative through the LEAF funding twice now, which I think has been a major support.
Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair Ines. And in the interest of time, I just have one question. May I make a quick comment at the end of my question?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Mike, thank you very much for the presentation. I'd like to ask about the business case and the issue of affordability and return on investment, because a lot of people at the city and outside wonder about, as Councillor Gazzola said, how big an issue this is and how daunting it looks. So in terms of what you're asking of the city, what would you say to people who are questioning about the current status quo and the affordability of what we're being asked to do and the eventual return on investment?
That's a great question. First of all, I'd underscore again that this is not the City of Kitchener moving on its own, but as part of a larger collective. And that secondly, the return, this is not simply about climate change, that by investing in this plan, we're looking at $350 million of value added to our local economy. That, again, I'll just revisit that briefly here, looking at work for over 5,000 people and being a part of the Climate Action Plan, that this is in our community's best interest, whether your primary concern is climate change, whether it's job creation, whether it's public health, whether it's energy security. It's really a win-win on all those fronts. And that's part of the balanced approach, that the recommendation here is not a 40% target, but rather one that we think is very achievable in the short term, gives us a starting point, puts a big win under our belt, and ideally puts us in a better position to take a stronger leadership role that will again be everyone's best interest in the years ahead.
Thank you for that answer. And it was my pleasure to be a part of this group and represent the City of Kitchener. And like Councillor Gazzola, I saw there was a lot of challenges when we sat down at the table. But I was really pleased to see that a lot of the partnerships were cross-sectoral, so that it wasn't just the public sector that was being asked to shoulder this, and that there was a lot of uptake and enthusiasm across the board. And in terms of the proactive versus reactive, I saw that there was huge benefits to getting started now, and there was a huge penalty, in a sense, if we didn't get started now, that it becomes a much more daunting prospect if we have to try and get started in 2020. That if we don't get started now, then it really becomes a huge, bigger mountain. If you could comment on that last piece there.
I could not agree more. Very similar to Councillor Verbanovich's comments around climate change adaptation, that the costs of climate change are already being seen in this community as they are being across the country, and that by investing now to actually get ahead to mitigate climate change, it puts us in a much stronger position to avoid the costs of adaptation, which are significantly higher. And again, that's what we're hearing from the IPCC, and we're seeing it in Calgary, in Toronto, in New York. That cost of climate change, those storms will increase with the rate of those will increase as climate change continues to advance. And so I think this is absolutely critical in our best interest, again, for those multiplicity of factors.
Thank you very much, Mike, and it's a great product, and I think that the community should get behind this fully and be proud of it, taking the leadership role and leading the way for a lot of other communities. So congratulations.
Thanks for your support and for being on the task force over the past couple of years.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Just on a interesting note, I was listening to the interviews that where Sarah is right now, the UN, as I was driving in on the UN United Nations climate negotiations, and it was kind of exciting. I didn't really want to leave my car because what the comments were and the number of people that were there talking about what happens, and they were addressing, there was a gentleman who was speaking from the Philippines, and he was talking about how the bigger typhoons are getting worse and worse, and there is a correlation. So just a quick piece of information there. I was thinking when I saw her email, I thought, oh, she may have been there, and she was. Some of the questions I have are just going back to our on 4-2, where it talks about the FCM's acknowledgement of Kitchener's fulfillment. Have you had some funding from FCM with regards to this, or is it just their support that's helped you leverage other funding?
So there's two inputs from FCM in the plan. The first is, yes, we receive funding through the Green Municipal Fund, and when I say it's actually the region was the applicant to the Green Municipal Fund. They're actually the largest contributor to the funding that led to the plan being developed over the past several years. Secondly, in my remarks and in the plan, it was FCM that commented, having seen a number of these plans developed across the country. Their comments to us were specifically on the amount of collaboration across a two-tiered municipality, that the number of sectors that were a part of it, and that each municipality was also a part of it in a really substantial way. Those are the comments we got from FCM, in addition to their financial support over the past couple of years.
And I've heard you say that it's Kitchener not doing it alone. We're working together, and I've actually been challenged recently by a particular citizen who is saying to me that, in his opinion, and he's worked on a number of different environmental initiatives regarding pesticides and that kind of issue, that Green Energy Act, endangered species, climate action initiatives are really hampering economic development and furthering. But so how do we sell it to people like that? I mean, you have this economic impacts analysis, and I mean, I certainly do strongly believe that there is economic benefit to reducing our greenhouse gases. And I mean, even if you just look at the healthcare and the cost of healthcare for people who are breathing in and dealing with some of those issues. So are there other points that you would say are sort of easy sells or easy points that you can say to people, but publicly, that, you know, anybody here who's here from the media could say, yeah, these are simple steps you can take?
Yeah, I can go a step further to say it's not about whether you believe there will be additional positive impacts. We had a third party come in to quantify exactly what those would be, just on the economics, outside of energy security, outside of public health. And you started to go down that there's certain benefits around, if you reduce smog, you reduce asthma, that reduce our costs for public health. But just on the economics alone, and just looking at the top 13 actions, the results again, $350 million valued to the local economy, over 5,000 people employed in the sector. I'd encourage you to refer back to those notes. In the plan itself, I believe we spend 2 pages going through the stats behind, so I'm not able to share all those with you here, but they're right in the plan. And again, that it's critical that we continue to communicate. This is really a community development plan that allows us to get a platform for our response to climate change, and it will put us in a better position economically and in those other factors.
Okay. Just one other, some of the initiatives you talk about, future considerations on page 83, and it's interesting, 2 of them, you know, popped up in my head, because I've heard about this before, and that's the warning labels on gasoline pumps. I've had citizens that send me emails that, you know, this is an initiative that we as a municipality should be taking. And in this document, you talk that it is a municipal, sorry, I just lost my, it's under the authority of the Municipal Act that we can do something like that. Is that?
Correct.
Okay, all right, that's good to know. I think I might now respond differently to that resident. The other one that I really like, and this is because I deal with this all the time in my ward, is school bus routes and auto traffic, and how we are trying to get people to stop driving their kids to school and letting them walk. That is definitely has an economic impact on citizens sitting in their car while they're queued up to drop off the kids, and the number of buses that we have to put on there. Is this something that you've been engaging in conversations with school boards as well?
I can speak to the point more broadly. I've not been in that particular conversation, but it really speaks to the value of this collaboration where we keep coming back to. Historically, if someone wants to talk about warning on gasoline pumps or school buses, there's no one really to talk to. And so there's a bunch of emails flying around to different councils, a very uncoordinated conversation, and every now and then something might actually get off the ground. Under this implementation approach, there would be an ongoing dedicated person whose job it is to host events and bring community together, to have a unified approach to respond to all these different ideas, ensure that there's a strong business case for each, and then have the lead agency move that ahead. And in some cases, it might be the City of Kitchener. In some cases, it might be Waterloo or the school board or any number of others. But it really changes the game for how we can respond and continue to move forward different actions to get ahead of climate change, and do it in a much more efficient way rather than some of the instances you had just mentioned there. So I'm not familiar with that particular one, but with this unified approach, it'll be a lot easier.
Okay, so then that really comes down to, I think what Councillor Gazzola may have been alluding to is on page 4-9 when it talks about financial and staff resource implications. And it's always difficult to sell that, I think, on the environment. And what you're saying, the City of Kitchener's not doing it alone. So are you suggesting and hoping that we will see the value of putting some financial resources behind a staff person either at the city level or from your organization level, so that they can carry the strategy, the implementation strategies forward? That's really what the crux of this is now.
Right. Let me pause. Brendan, would you like to start, or would you like me to? So the approach in the plan is to continue with a project lead for climate action WR. That person would be funded by all 3 municipalities as well as the region. And this endorsement, the wording I believe involves putting together terms of reference to finalize that. And that's the direction that would be given to staff. But yes, you're absolutely right. That'd be a full-time person. And that person would, again, report to this collaborative group.
Through the chair, just to supplement that answer, this report and recommendation that's before you today does not require you to commit to that. That could come back as part of any future budget process or separate recommendation. What the recommendation is worded specifically before you is that we're committing to continue with the collaborative approach, and it needs to look at the things that are in the bulleted item on 4-2, which includes having the discussions about how is that properly managed. So who would the Kitchener rep be, and do we financially contribute to the ongoing management of this or not? That does not have to be decided today, but we need to know that that is the right way to go about having a collaborative approach instead of trying to do it all ourselves.
Right, and I agree, Brandon. I think we do have to support the work that's been done, and we need to move forward. But I think we also need to understand the implications, because if we want to really make a difference, we want to get to that 6%, we are going to, in some essence, have to put our money where our mouth is. And it's all fine and dandy to say, yes, we support this. But if it comes to budget time and then there's a request for some funding to be put to that, where do we take from Peter to pay Paul to make this an actuality, to make this actually happen? And I mean, you're preaching to the choir in terms of my belief system and where we need to go. I think it's a harder sell when we talk to the average citizen on where this is going to lead. And that was my example from that one gentleman who's been really challenging me on this. So that's all I have to say. But you know, I really appreciate all the work, and I was appreciative of being able to sit with you and Sarah and really have a good long conversation about this. So thanks very much, and let's hope we can take that next step.
Thank you for being a part of it and for that clarification.
Mayor Zare.
I'll pass. The questions I had, and one more, are not important right now. Let's just move on.
Councillor Vermanovich?
To make the motion?
You can make your motion.
Okay, sure. I'll move the recommendation that's before us. And again, I want to compliment everybody who's been involved. I think it's been referenced that municipalities have in either their direct or indirect control 45% of greenhouse emissions across this country, and whether it's through our own actions or the policies that we have that we set for us or for the community on things like sustainable transportation, and that ultimately end up impacting our ability to play an influence in all this. I think the other thing that's important two other points that are important to remember is the last time we surveyed our residents, and this is going pre-recession, I think about 80% said the environment was their number one priority for us as a city. So I think this is consistent with that. And secondly, this doesn't just need to be looked at as a potential cost in terms of achieving these improvements. There's a lot that can be achieved in terms of growing Canada's green economy through this. And FCM issued a report 2 years ago on this, and that marries very nicely with some of the work that we're doing from an economic development strategy point of view around developing our advanced technology sectors and others that ultimately could benefit or in fact be part of the global solution or the Canadian solution around issues of climate change. That would be it.
Since there are no other comments, I just wanted to say, like, the $1 invested by us is leveraged out to $44 I think that's simply awesome and amazing. Wow. Wish most investments would, in any type of investment, would lead that type of return. And I think just want to thank you and the Climate Action Waterloo Region for bringing such an incredible initiative to our community, the region, and help us move forward with this as a map and give it a qualitative figure, because I think you're being modest in the sense that it's a small change, but I think it's a big change. From if we continue to go, it'll be 17.5% increase, and instead we're going to be going below the 6. So I think that's a big change, and wish you all the best. And thank you. And with that, I call the vote. Record vote. Voting commence. It's unanimous? Okay. It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Up next on the agenda is the South Kitchener District Master Plan. And I think Mr. Ritz will give us a presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Ritz, when you're ready. Before you begin, Mr. Ritz, I just want to let the committee know we're about 45 minutes to our original scheduled end time at 5 o'clock. Let's try to be succinct as possible. Thank you. Go ahead.
No problem. Okay. Good afternoon, members of council and senior staff. My name is Dan Ritz. I'm with the Infrastructure Services Department. I'm pleased to present the findings of the South Kitchener District Park Master Plan. Your package includes a staff report as well as a master plan report that was circulated separately. The master plan will provide guidance to future design and approvals. It's the precursor to implementation, detailed design, and construction. There we go. I'll begin by acknowledging the staff team. It's identified on page 4 of the report. The team consisted of departments across the organization. Some of the representatives are in the audience today, and they'll help answer some questions at the end of the presentation. I'll also acknowledge that the report was an in-house staff effort, utilizing the expertise of staff. Consultant support was also utilized. I'll acknowledge Fred Galloway, who's also in the audience, who led the user group in consultation and the trends analysis. Also AMIC Engineering, which assisted with our stormwater management and site servicing. District parks are scattered throughout the city. We have approximately 17 in total. They function to provide services to a group of neighborhoods. Although the South Kitchener District Park is physically located in Ward 5, the park provides services to adjacent wards and communities, as well as residents across the city. Some of the examples of district parks that we currently have are Brightup, Southwest Optimist, Rosenberg, Bud, and Kaufman Park, to name a few of them. Recognizing the Southwest Kitchener as a growth area, the park location is located appropriately serviced to service this community. Community consultation was approximately 12 months in length. We engaged about 300 residents. Community consultation was one of several major factors in preparing the report, but not the only one. The consultation plan can be found in Appendix D in the report. Some of the key milestones we had, the first piece was our stakeholder consultation done over the course of November and January, and it involved focus groups, interviews, which covered both the indoor and outdoor amenity areas. That summary can be found in Appendix H, and a lot of that work was done by Fred Galloway and Associates. The second piece was our concept plan development. What it included was 3 concept plans which were introduced at a public meeting on April 17th. That information was put on a web page, including an online survey. That summary can be found in Appendix B in the report. And the third piece of our consultation was our master plan consultation. That included a draft master plan which was placed on the web page with an online survey, and that summary can be found in Appendix C of the report. The master plan responds to public review of various planning and study guidelines. The major components of the plan include the park amenity area, the recreational area, the multi-purpose sports fields, and the indoor recreation center, all of which I'll explain a little more in detail in the next slides. Some of the terminology you'll find in the report includes principles, which are associated with each of the park features, and priorities, which respond to each of the major components, and we'll talk about those in a little bit more. The first area was the park amenity area, and it includes a park central hub, which is a large grass-based area, which center focuses the park amenities. It's a 4-season use area for free play and winter ice activities. There's also a playground area, which is adjacent to the central lawn, and it'll include an accessible play structure and a splash pad. We also have multi-use trails, which will be paved and accessible paths. They'll link all the park amenities, the recreational center, and the sports fields. They'll also have direct links to the adjacent community. In addition, there's a field house which is adjacent to the central lawn. It contains a washroom and change room buildings, and it's a reuse of an existing heritage house. The first major area is our recreational area. It's adjacent to the central lawn field house. It provides non-programmed and programmed recreational for all ages. The facilities include the basketball area, which could be a full court and several half courts, beach volleyball with 3 courts, a bike pump track and skate park, and a double court for either tennis or ball hockey. The Leisure Facility Master Plan made recommendation for sports fields at the South Kitchener District Park for consideration for artificial turf and lit fields. It also made a recommendation for a balance of field type, including non-traditional uses. Multi-purpose fields support a number of field types. Individually, they would not support a dedicated field, but collectively, they involve a significant number of users. The first field I'll refer to is Field A. It's a football-sized field. It can be used for rugby, field hockey, lacrosse, discs, soccer, and other sports. It would preferably be synthetic turf and lit for evening use. The second field area would be our double soccer combination cricket pitch. It could be used for other field uses as well, and it includes a viewing area and a half-kilometer track or trail around the field area. The plan also includes an indoor recreation center, which is positioned with frontage along Fisher-Hallman. That footprint includes an aquatic facility for instruction, fitness, and leisure, an arena with twin ice pads for either replacement or growth, an athletic facility, potentially for indoor turf or other indoor courts, and supporting amenities like an outdoor plaza and parking. The master plan contains a series of principles that will inform detailed design and future work. These key park elements and their related principle form the building blocks or the driving force for the implementation of the plan. Detailed wording of each of these principles can be found in Section 3 of the Master Plan Report, beginning on page 63, or even in the executive summary starting on page 5. Staff are recommending that the principles, along with the master plan, be approved. Staff are also recommending that project priorities be approved along with the master plan. They can be found starting on page 96 or section 4.3 or in the executive summary starting on page 15. Project priorities are divided into 4 areas: site preparation and servicing, park amenities and recreational area, multipurpose fields, and the indoor recreational complex. Each priority contains a priority order 1 through 4, a year of development, and a cost estimate. A detailed cost breakdown can be found in section 4.2 on page 95. Staff are requesting that the following 2 recommendations be approved. The first one deals with plan, principles, and priorities. That the South Kitchener District Park Master Plan, including the principles and project priorities contained within the document, be approved. The second recommendation deals with business planning and capital budget. That the South Kitchener District Park Master Plan be referred to the departmental business planning and capital budget processes. In summary, the South Kitchener District Park Master Plan demonstrates a balance of leisure and recreational facilities in the park plan. It provides guidance to future designs and approvals through a series of park principles, and it identifies a logical sequence of project priorities identified by the community. I'd like to thank you, and our project team is available to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, we have a few questions for you.
Sure.
Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Yeah, my first question would be there has been funding that was assigned after the 2005 Leisure Facilities Master Plan was approved by the Council of the Day. Can you tell me when the original funding was put in the capital forecast to fund this project?
For the implementation of the overall plan?
Right.
So you'll find in section 4 implementation, there's a cost breakdown there. And in that section,
I think, before you go to that section, I think you've misunderstood my question.
Sure.
I want to know from when it was approved in the 05 master plan, when the park was initially approved by the Council of the Day. When was the initial funding allotted in the capital forecast? Not where is it now, but where was it back then?
so it's been several years that it's been identified through the capital budget process. Different components came in at different times. I don't know the exact years when those came in. The sport field component was put into the budget at one point. The arena and the aquatic center piece was put into the capital budget probably several years back as well. I don't know those exact years.
Okay, well, I think that's something that's important to, not right now, but to find out, especially before council. I could probably answer some of it, but I think it's important for staff to bring that forward just so we can understand how far this
I
is.
don't know. Maybe, Ryan, do you recall any of that offhand?
That's okay.
Not offhand.
Just so that we can see how long it's being pushed out from the initial inception. And the reason why I think that's important is for the residents who have moved into that area have been anticipating this complex going up. Actually now is when the funding was initially for. So I think that's important that we can understand that as we move forward with this master plan. By the way, I think it's a great document and it's got a lot of great information. One of the questions I had was with regards to the principles. I just was wondering, is there any priority in the numbering sequence that you put the principles in, or is it just I forget how many there were, 13 principles, so you just outlined them?
No, the principles aren't prioritized. Basically, they just relate to the park elements.
Okay. And I don't want to go too much into the timing because I understand that this is a master plan. But is there a chance, whether it be through the development charge review, that we may be able to see, especially priorities 3 and 4, come in quicker than what we see in this master plan document?
So the intent of this plan is to inform the development charge review. We don't set those dates specifically in here. We recognize when we put together the scheduling, We put them together as years, like years 1 to 2, 3 to 4, etc., recognizing that at some point we have to have a starting point when budgets are available and that everything's in place in the capital budget process.
Okay. That's all my questions. I'd be prepared, Mr. Chair, to move the recommendation with one minor change to it when it's appropriate.
Sure. Mr. May wants to add an additional comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I would just add on to the answer to Councillor Galloway-Seelock's last question. You'll recall that as part of the Leisure Facilities Master Plan, Council specifically prioritized a variety of citywide recreational facilities, many of which were within the South District Park. And so in answer to your question, we will move, as part of the DC review, we'll move through that council-approved priority list and put them into the capital forecast as quickly as we can, understanding the other priorities within the community.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. And that actually helps me understand year one, when this might start. I guess we have to set the budgets for that. My question pertains to priority 1, and on page 5.3 it says that this work is currently not identified in the 10-year capital budget forecast, but it's the first foundational piece that needs to happen. So I was wondering how we can move forward with the other elements if this isn't forecast for.
It's a good question. Presently in the capital budget, we've identified priority 2, which is the park amenity and recreational areas. They've been in the capital budget for some time now, even though they're a few years out. Same with the multi-purpose fields. They're in the capital budget. Portions of the indoor recreation complex are also in the capital budget in those later years, the aquatic center and the arenas. What we haven't done, and that's why this master plan process was really necessary, is we haven't looked at the whole picture. And one of the first pieces that needs to be done is really the preparation of the site. Put in the site servicing, do the area grading and that. And that's a piece that really hasn't had a lot of thought put to it until this master plan was put together. So yes, it's a piece that we need to do first. And yes, it's going to be some challenges to see how that would fit into the capital budget process.
And I guess that's what Mr. May was alluding to when we're talking about getting started.
Yes.
Right? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks, Dan. Just need to understand a little bit of the process that happened before we got to this point. Now, in the report, you're saying approximately 300 residents were involved through the community consultation. Can you help me understand what percentage of those were not staff and not council and not special interest? Like, what were the actual residents? I mean, I counted 123 comments from one of the public open houses. That's not really 300 residents, but I suspect that you're including in that group any of the sports groups, people that you spoke to. Would that be a correct understanding?
Through the chair. So the 300 is an approximate figure that represents all of the consultations. So that includes the user group consultation we did. That includes the draft concept plans that we did and the survey information we got back, as well as the emails and the comment sheets. That also includes the final park draft master plan, the comments that we got from the online survey. Putting all those together, it's approximately 300 residents were involved.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I suspected, because I'm trying to get a sense of, I mean, each of those user groups are going to have their own agenda, and we'll push that forward as to what they want to see in this park. And you said at the beginning that a district park is really, and it's in the report as well, that it's beyond a neighborhood park, but not necessarily citywide or region. So if you're getting only 122 responses from the online survey, did you break that down between Ward 5 residents or other residents from the rest of the community?
Through the chair, no, we didn't divide it up by the ward. We recognize a district park, regardless of what district park we have in the city, that residents use it from across the city. They may use the one that's closest to them, but you'll find residents will go to an arena that's across the street or across the city just because that's the one where their team is booked. We see the same happening with this district park. where you'll have a group of neighborhoods that, or neighbors that'll probably use it quite a bit, but residents across the city will use the park as well.
Right, and that's what I kind of figured you were going to say that, because it is capturing people from essentially all across the city, more than just, it's just, you know, a neighborhood interest. Okay. The other question I had to you, sorry, you were just speaking to Councillor Dan Graham regarding the capital that's not there for priority one. I guess I'm a little bit concerned about, you know, moving this too far forward, because we are in such a negative position with our DC charges, and losing focus on other priorities that have been set. What other funding arrangements, or would you be looking at public-private partnerships for funding for this park?
So the public partnership piece wasn't the mandate of our master plan, and I think that's a piece that still can be looked at through other processes. I think the challenge will be, and that's why we've split the recommendations, and the second recommendation really deals with referring this to the departmental business plans and the capital budget process, because if we're tight on funding, we may have to look at the funding that's currently there for the South District Park, and we may have to look at that priority one and see where we can position it, and maybe some of the other things might have to slide, or we need to look corporate-wide, how do we fit priority one in here?
So should that maybe be a part of the recommendation, is that if funding is not coming forward from DC charges? I mean, we've seen, and certainly I have in my ward, I've seen a significant drop in building permits and sales and uptake. And, you know, there is a large area of land that's being serviced right now at the corner of Fisher Hallman and Huron Road, which would be directly opposite this proposed park. But if there's not that uptake in that area, which is where I would assume that some of the DC charges would come from, should we be either pushing this out a few more years with the caveat that if we are able to engage in a public-private partnership, that could be a part of these recommendations?
So that's really what the second recommendation does. It does ask staff to then go back through the capital budget processes and other processes to look at that. It wouldn't be in time for this capital budget season, because we're already well into it, but it'd be an opportunity in 2014 to look at the 2015 plus capital budget process and where do these priorities fit.
Okay, and I understood that, Dan, but I guess what I'm suggesting is that maybe should we go one step further and maybe suggest that we should be looking at public-private partnerships as a future determiner for funding for this kind of park.
And there is a separate process that's dealing with that, and maybe I can ask Michael May to maybe address that a little bit.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would make two comments. I think, first of all, Council has already referred the prioritization of funding for recreational facilities to the DC review. So there's no need to do that again today. We will, as part of that DC review, look at the bucket of development charge funding available for recreational services and simply work down the pre-approved council list to decide when funding will be assigned. I would remind Council of what was certainly a significant theme of the Leisure Facilities Master Plan update, and if I recall correctly, every single one of you spoke in favor of the idea of partnerships. And so we are really working towards not identifying specific buildings that might be a partnership. We want to ingrain that into the work we do every day. And so whether it's through the sponsorship strategy, which will come to Council in early December, I know that we've identified naming rights on this particular park as a significant opportunity, or through other types of partnerships. That is hopefully going to become the way we do business. But in the meantime, the list that Council approved as a part of the Leisure Facilities Master Plan update, if you'll recall, it assumed that we had none of those. The point was that hopefully we'll be able to move some projects, and we used the Rockaway Senior Center as the example, up through partnerships. But the priority listing that council has approved is for the DC review.
Great, and thank you for that reminder, Mr. May. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't getting ahead of ourselves with this master plan and putting forward a park when there were other priorities that are higher up on the list. So great. Okay, thanks very much. Just one other quick question. If nothing is implemented, so this is a master plan. So this isn't really fine details and detailed design at this point in time. How long does something like this sort of, I don't want to say sit on a shelf, but how long does it have a shelf? What is the shelf life of this master plan before significant changes would happen to it?
Through the chair, I think the opportunity with the master plan is we know we will be going back through various business cases. We will be looking at that in more detail. So the plan you see before you today may not necessarily be the final result. There's going to be changes. There's going to be, detail that's going to change over time. An example would be the aquatic center, the ice rinks and that. We may find by the time we get to those that we've done the business cases and there's a slightly different configuration or requirements needed for those areas.
Okay. And I think that's really important for the public to know, because I think sometimes they see a master plan like this and they see all the suggestions and the work that goes into it in terms of their input. And certainly there's a letter very clearly from the Kitchener Baseball Association that we're not happy that it wasn't included in it. But the public needs to understand that this is a living document, I guess, to some degree, right? And that things can change. Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Gazzola.
Just, I want to go back to the 300 consultations. Is there a way that we can find out where those originated from? I don't need that now, but I'm just curious as to how many were from Ward 5.
Yeah, a good portion of the consultation was done through the online survey, and I don't know if we'll have the actual addresses or location for that.
Yeah. Okay. Perhaps you can look at it, and if you can find, that would be fine. The other thing, you mentioned district park. What other district parks are there in our community? Can you just give me a...
Yep. Bud Park, Kaufman Park, Bright Up Park. There's several throughout the community. In the report, there's actually a plan that identifies the location of all the district parks. There's about 17 of them in total.
Pardon?
There's about 17 in total.
District parks.
Yes.
Yeah. Are any of them comparable to the size and scope of this park?
They all differ slightly, so I don't think there's a magic formula for a district park. A lot of them are sports field based, but some may also have recreational components like indoor, like a pool and that as well. So they do differ quite a bit across the city.
If I were to ask for a map, I'm concerned with the last two major components that I don't think would normally be a district. If I were to ask for a map that showed where our arenas are across the city, how would that look with this particular? And the same thing with aquatics facilities. Yeah. How would it look with this?
So we don't have that in the report, but it was done through the mapping of the leisure facilities master plan update, so you can find those maps in there.
And it'll give me that answer.
And as far as the location of the district parks, on page 48, there's a diagram that shows the location of the district parks scattered throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Just two questions. I just would like a little bit more clarification, if I could, on page 138 about. It looks as though, and again, I know this is early, but the choice is going with leaning towards two pads and not necessarily looking at shuttering existing arenas. Is there any further thought or direction in that in terms of, it does say that there was a strong preference for a 4-rink facility, of course, there would be. But in terms of costs and possibly bumping it up in the forecast by using the capital we would get from closing and presumably selling another arena?
So the master plan right now identifies a building footprint that would allow for space for 2 ice pads. The master plan also identifies that that could either be replacement or growth related, depending on when we get to that point, what do we need? So at this point, business cases need to be created to kind of develop that further. Also the restriction on the current land that we have for the master plan, or for the South District Park, is that we don't have room for a 4-pad complex. We simply don't have enough room on the site to do that. So at this point, it makes sense to consider 2 pads, whether they be replacement or whether they be for growth related in the city.
Okay. I'll hold my thought on that for a second. Just looking in, apologies if I missed it, but you did mention the one section of the park is planned for 4-season use. Is there any possibility of looking at some of the parks? I noticed if they use some of the, for example, the dirt from the storm water pond to build up a bit of a berm for a small toboggan hill, that sort of thing. Is there any plans for that in the?
We hadn't considered tobogganing on the site. It's a relatively flat site. It's something we can always look at through the detailed design.
Okay, very good. And last question, I'm looking at the photo here, and I'm hoping all those trees look very similar. I'm hoping they're not ash trees. So.
Mayor Zaire.
Thanks very much. I have some comments, but I'll hold those. Presumably we're getting towards the end on this. I think this is leading to a question and request. I think the question that Councillor Galloway-Sealock raised earlier about the timing is important and significant here. And I say that because of the type of queries and comments that are being made around the horseshoe right now. I think that context is important. I know there is a little bit in the report, but in terms of how it was in the various stages of capital, I think are important. And I think, was I correct that someone was going to do some work and try to get that for us? It could be a simple spreadsheet, just it was in this year and not in that year and so on, and as it was moved along. And there aren't that many lines that it would affect that. But at the same time, as part of that information, I think it would be helpful to understand the population change since the plans began, both for that area and citywide, because this is the first recreational area that we are developing since when? That's my question.
It's a long time. Apart from considering McLennan Park, which is really a citywide park.
So I guess my point
everybody can think of one.
I think it even expands on my point.
Yeah.
It has been a long time. So
Yes.
I think we have to go back, a decade, even before this plan was begun, to when we last had a major recreational facility built, and to understand the need, and that will lead to some of my, that's the build-up to some of my comments later on. So I'm requesting that information, I think, would be helpful when this comes back again.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have some comments, so if I could.
We'll go around for comments if you want to click in. Councillor Yaneski?
Thank you. It's a very interesting report in terms of all the details, which is wonderful and well put together and well analyzed. When I look at the location of the proposed district park in the southwest part of Kitchener, in that area, geographically, it's situated perfectly to meet that southwest quadrant. However, we have a countryside line that has been created just recently and eliminates a whole hundreds of acres of potential developable land in that area, which eliminates potential of tens of thousands of potential users in terms of people living in that area as future growth. So really, when you put in a countryside line and where the park is located, it's really on the line practically, which makes it really at the edge of the city and not being central to where all the other district parks are throughout Kitchener, which are providing services and facilities to the immediate area, as well as you pointed out. You know, if you've got a hockey team, is either playing at Grand River or is it playing at KCI or one of the arenas, just because of scheduling and stuff that nature, or the level of the age of the kids playing. So of course they're going citywide to use these facilities. But you know, when you say district, basically it covers the district in that immediate area. And here basically you got a whole chunk that's been eliminated. Do you feel that that's a perfect location, or are we really should be moving it more inward towards the city? I know the city owned the land since the 80s. It's just one of those things that you buy it and you sort of put it. But back in the 80s, the plan was for the city to grow all the way out to the limits. And now that's changed through official plan policies.
It's a great question, and I guess there's two parts to that. You know, the land is where the land is. You know, that's the land that we purchased back in the 80s. The availability of a land similar size, more towards the inner part of the city would be a real challenge and a cost. I think I'll go to Brandon to answer some of the planning questions that you have there. Go ahead, Mr. Sloan.
Sure, through the chair to help supplement. It is a good location for a district park of this scale. Council considered the location as part of the community master plan several years ago, which was approved for this area. It is currently at the edge of the city urban area. The councillor is correct. Through the community master plan design, this will work, and it's good. And in fact, it actually is something that will help connect more than one neighborhood. That is part of the function of this park as well, and the design that we have here in terms of the internal road, etc. In those adjacent neighborhoods, they are planned to have great neighborhood parks. And this is the district park, which is going to have a lot of activity. It's okay that it's on the edge. Some are in the middle of the community in other district parks, other scenarios, and this one is located where it is. As was mentioned, the city does have ownership of the land. It can also work in the future too. Whatever may happen, as the councillor mentioned, it is well located at that intersection of Huron and Fisher-Hallman, both for serving adjacent neighborhoods. For future transit is planned to this area as well. So from our perspective, it actually can meet a lot of the planning objectives.
Thank you. I thought that would be something of an answer that would come back just based on the rationale. You can see it. On page 95 of the report, there is a breakdown of the cost estimate of the master plan, showing site preparation, park amenities, recreational area, multipurpose fields, and then the indoor recreation center. And each has got a dollar component of $5 million, 3.4, 1.1, 4.7, then 40 million. And all that totals is about, let's say, 50 million in total, just ballparking it roughly. Sorry, and at the bottom it says 60 million.
60. We split it out between design and consulting and construction. There's two columns there.
Okay, sorry, yeah, I forgot that. That's right, so $60 million. Yet you look at the top of the page and you've got a contingency factor of 40 to 60%. Let's take an average of 50. Well, you're telling me then that this $60 million park could end up costing $90 million, $100 million, potentially? Is that correct?
The way the capital budget system is set up is we have a class system, and these are identified as Class C in the budget. So contingencies have been built into these budgets.
I do appreciate that. And when you look at all the other projects that the city has in terms of engineering works or other works, there's contingency factors also put in, and they're used. So I can see this being used. I mean, you're doing your homework to put in these contingency percentages, but when it comes down to the bottom line, and as in the end, when you finally have to build it, and you start building it and there's a cost overrun or something, this is what happens. Just a comment.
Okay. Councillor Galloway, Seelock, prepared to add an amendment to the...
Well, I'm going to move the recommendation, and I just want to add one clause in there, and it's with respect to timing. And it would be worded that the timelines outlined in the master plan be guidelines, and where possible, through the DC review, consideration be given to decreasing timelines. I know that Michael pretty much already said that the priorities are already set with regards to the DC. I just want to see this recommendation included in order for it to be right there with this report, so that as we move forward with this, that just has the opportunity to still sit there. So just, it's not saying let's move all of them up, but give consideration to move timelines if possible. So it's, I think it's important just to put it in there. And just for a couple comments, this has been a long time coming, even just for the master plan, and I think that this is a really important piece to move forward. And to, from ease of my mind as well, when I looked at the dollar figure, it's substantial. But this council or the council of the day will still have the opportunity to continue to approve different pieces of this master plan going forward. And if it were to come in substantially over budget, or there wasn't money in the budget, that they will have the opportunity to address that at the time. I think today and next week is really our opportunity to help set that vision of what this park can look like. I don't recall my experience at being at the public consultation and having looked at the sign-in sheet. I can't tell you who was part of special interest groups, but I can tell you that I don't believe that there was that high of a percentage of people who were specifically from Ward 5 that came out to comment. I think there was a range of areas that were represented, if I remember correctly, and I'm sure Dan can look at the sign-in sheets to give us that information specifically, but I only recognized a few addresses on there representing Ward 5. I'm really happy with the work that's gone into this. I think it's been a very thorough consultation, and that staff have done a very good job. And I think, having been able to represent more than just Ward 5 in my 7 years on council, and being able to hear from people in the southwest corner overall, this really reflects what I've been hearing from the community of what their priorities are. Sure, no one probably put priority one as their priority one, because no one really looks at the site preparation and servicing, but definitely that there needs to be fields out there, and that the pool, I will continue to say, number one thing that I heard from residents specifically is pool. And I really feel it's important for us to continue to move forward with this, because a lot of the DCs that are coming into our community are coming from the southwest corner, and not specifically Ward 5, but the southwest corner. And I think it's important for them to have the amenities and be able to utilize the DCs that are coming from that area. So I think it's really important that we approve this as just the next step to continue to move this forward. And I think that staff and everyone involved has done a good job, and that it will be a living document, and it can change, but that for now, with the trends and what we've heard from the community, this is the plan that we should continue to move forward with. So I hope that we can get the support of committee and council.
Mayor Zier.
Thank you. I'll be quite brief. A lot of good questions. I think the staff have done a good job of putting this together. It is one of the most complex projects that we've probably done as a city in terms of trying to get everything into one particular site. And so it is reasonable that it takes some time to put it together. In terms of the where the people came from, or as part of the consultation, or where they did not come from, you can argue it both ways. You could say, well, where were the Ward 5 people? Why weren't they there if they're going to be affected by this? That would be one argument. On the other side, you could say, well, no, these weren't just the residents trying to be selfish. This was a broader community affair, and both could be right. The point I'm making is that it's irrelevant as to where the people came from and were participating in the consultation. There were that number of people primarily through the user groups, and I think that's the important thing to remember. It's not just the individuals who would like to have something there, it's those who are helping to organize and plan for the city as a whole. Yes, we have a backlog and a deficit within the DC at the present time, and there is a slowdown of development. However, I think that we can, if we aren't careful, we can easily get spooked by the current level of development and say that that's the new norm and it's going to dry up and there's going to be no more development in the city of Kitchener. And I think that would be a very foolish thing to do. So you still have to be making plans to play this out. I concur with Councillor Galway-Seelock in terms of the need for greater amenities, notwithstanding that it is a district park, because the people and the thousands of people who are now living in the southwest side of the city are traveling at greater distances to have the same kind of amenities that others are having within a shorter distance to where they live today. I think there is a good chance that there will be some sort of 3P participation on some of this, but for recreational facilities with little traditional return on investment from a private sector is concerned, that we have to really be aware that this is going to be philanthropy and sponsorship, if there is anything at all. And in the greater context, we need to look at that when the report comes back to us. Just a minor edit on the amendment, if I could. I think you used the word reducing the timelines. Is that decreasing? Okay, and I would just say, if you don't mind, decreasing the length of the timelines, because decreasing it could go both ways. Those are my comments. Thank
you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair Nidis. I just wanted to echo that I think this is it's a great document. Definitely overdue, so I'm happy to support the amendment as well. Just in comments, a couple quick items. Firstly, I would like to, I already put it out there, but I'm interested in seeing if we can possibly use some of the soil we move for stormwater to make a bit of a berm for Toboggan Hill. I think that would be great. And secondly, I really think there should be a hard look at the arena situation. It was referred to in the document, but I truly believe that while folks really want resources like community centers and libraries nearby, I don't think my personal experience and those I've spoke to they're not terribly concerned about traveling longer distances to make use of hockey arenas and ice facilities. So when we're looking at operating costs down the road, I'm going to be looking for some solid numbers that say why we shouldn't possibly be closing 2 individual rinks in place of building 3 or 4. So that's my primary interest. Other than that, I'm happy with what we have here before us. And I will lastly touch upon the contingency, which I want to be clear on. Yes, there's a huge contingency there, but it's not like we're going to be half done building this facility before we realize that we're $30 million over budget. That contingency will close considerably and will be dealt with by the council of the day. So that's not a concern of mine at this point either. But again, thank you for your work.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Thanks very much. Just very briefly, I will be supporting the the recommendation before us. I think staff have done a great job on this report. It's very thorough, and I think it's important that as we go forward with this, to keep in mind what's really essential as we develop the last piece of significant greenfield development that we have in our community in that southwest corner, is to try to create that complete neighborhood, essentially, that's going to provide the amenities for people living in that part of the city as soon as possible. I think they've been patient and have been waiting long enough. To wait for pieces of this will still continue to be there for a number of years, but at least we're well on our way, and we can move forward in the years ahead and see this come to fruition.
Councillor Fernandez?
Could you just give us a full clarity and understanding of what the amendments are? Because there's been lots of discussion around it. So could you do that really quick? Okay, and then I just have a couple comments.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was adding to the recommendation. The specific wording that I have is that the timelines outlined in the master plan be guidelines, and where possible through the DC review, consideration be given to decreasing the length of the timelines.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's I wanted that so that I could understand. Could I make my comments related to that? I think that we have to be cautious, as much as I've heard from my ward, who would also benefit from this park. It's a real balancing act between the services we want to provide and the tax increases that would mean, because even though the park itself would come from the DC charges, the maintenance of the park, the maintenance of the pool, and so forth, would be coming from the tax base. So I think we have to be really careful if we're talking about moving the timelines out. And I kind of like that you used the word guidelines, but and I heard what Mr. May said. It is going to depend on how things, and what the priorities were initially there, and how those unfold. So I think it is important to understand the percentage of residents versus user groups, because user groups are definitely going to be a stronger voice. They're going to bring forward their suggestions of what what they want, and that's why I wanted to have an understanding of what the average residents, and whether it was more Ward 5 or there was Ward 4 or there was a real combination. I really want to hear what they want and what their hope and dream would be for this park. So I think that there's been some good work done. I'm glad to hear that it has a shelf life, but that it also has ability to change and move with the times, and move with the economics, and move. I think that Councillor Davies' point is well taken, if I understand him correctly, that there could be a shift in whether we need a double arena or a single arena. There could be a shift in that. And is that what you were understand? Is that what you said? Okay, yeah. So just want to make sure I was clear on what he said. All right, thanks very much.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I think this is just a wonderful opportunity for us as a committee to, to have a plan such as this. It's community building 101. It's something that is desperately needed in the Southwest area. I know residents in my ward would be pleased to see this plan move forward, in the sense that I see and I hear a lot of comments about Forest Heights Pool is busting through the seams, and this is an entranceway into our community, and I think the district park will serve much more than just Ward 5 or the adjacent wards, and it fits in perfectly with our new way of planning, with the Rosenberg plan and the other communities that are going to be developed. That's all walkable, with transportation supported. This is a new way of thinking. This is going to be a great project and will suit the community well, and I'm glad to see this is here and we have a recorded vote. and it's carried. Thank you, Mr. Ritz.
You're welcome.
And the last item up on the agenda is natural gas inspection of the Laurentian West Community Follow-up. And Mr. Malcolm, are you prepared to report the committee on the report, please?
In the essence, to speed up the process, the report was pretty straightforward. I'll entertain any questions that the committee members may have at this time.
Councillor Galloway Seelock, please.
Yeah, Wally, I'm just wondering, this was obviously in one specific area of the city that we did this in, and with the numbers that we saw, would we expect similar numbers if we had inspected other areas of the city or pretty much other cities within the province?
Through the chair, yes, I would expect that if we surveyed the rest of the city or the province, you would see similar results.
Okay, and if any of the questions I ask aren't should be asked in closed session, just let me know. But the second question that I wanted to ask was, what was the number of leaks or problems that came forward in this inspection? That was related to the Kitchener Utilities responsibilities.
We found a couple locations by the riser of the where the gas meter comes into the house area. Again, there were just minor leaks, but there were a couple in that area.
Okay, so they were a very small percentage. And I think my other question is, follow up on that, is how often does Kitchener Utilities check the areas of their responsibility for the city?
Kitchener Utilities every year surveys 1/3 of the city of Kitchener. We also, for public buildings like hospitals and schools where a lot of public gather, we do that on a yearly basis.
Okay, and just following up, if it was a small percentage of the concerns that came out in this inspection, in a very general sense, can you give us a sense of what some of the other concerns were and fixes that needed to be made and whose responsibilities those may be? And again, it can be very general.
Yeah, the majority that we found were, other than the gas leaks, were venting within the house. So there was damaged venting that needed to be repaired. Had nothing to do with natural gas. It just had to do with the exhaust of the burning appliance.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, I don't want to ask anything that I shouldn't be asking, but were we able to ascertain whether in any of the incidences whether people had hooked up things on their own without going through a reputable dealer or through the city?
Through the chair, during our investigation, all appliances were installed by a qualified contractor. There was no...
How do you know that?
Basically, we have, and I'll show you an example. This is a pressure tag that all contractors that install gas appliances within homes need to fill out. So they fill out their name, their company name, their license number, and what sort of test they completed to ensure there was no natural gas leak, as well as what was the installation that they completed. And in all those instances, we found this tag hanging by all the appliances.
And I gather that tag should be left there.
Yes, it's a requirement that the tag remain at the site of the work.
Yeah. When you in the report, and you mentioned it again, you say you check a third every year. What are you checking, inside or outside or what?
We check our distribution system, so the entire underground piping system, valves, all the way up to the meter itself at the house. That is what's completed every 3 years for a third of the city. So we check everything that's on the outside.
Yeah. Now, Was there a time when our utilities did do checkups inside for free?
Through the chair, the only time that utility goes in is during the initial inspection. So when the house is built and the gas appliances are installed, before we set the meter and turn the gas onto the building, the distributors such as Kitchener Utilities must go in to do an inspection of that facilities inside and then determine whether it can be connected or not. That's the time. So that is a service that's required through regulation.
And you check all the connections?
Yes, we're supposed to do a pressure test on the system to ensure there's no leaks.
Yeah.
And then when we turn the gas on, we do the light ups of the appliances.
No, actually, what I was referring to, there was a time that Kitchener Utilities used to do a free checkup in the summer, just a review of your furnace, anything that was connected. It was a service call that they didn't charge for in those days. Do we do any of that anymore? Or if we don't, what is the price of doing that?
The price varies. You're probably looking at an average about $100 to $120 to do that type of work. Initially, what you may be referring to is when natural gas was starting out in the community as a choice for heating in homes. Kitchener Utilities probably did certain things for free for the customer while promoting the presence of natural gas and the utilization of natural gas in the house as a heating source.
So, but in order to have that checked periodically, it is a service call.
That is correct.
And a service call in excess of $100.
That's correct.
Yeah. Is there, in view of what's happened, is there any thought of sort of promoting that?
Through our education.
Marketing a sale price? Or?
Through our education, we present to the residents what are their responsibilities, food for thought in regards to their gas appliance servicing. So we have talk about the carbon monoxide issues. We also talk about getting your appliance serviced on an annual basis to ensure there's no issues. It's all about the safety of utilizing the gas appliance within your home. They need to understand that any appliance that's within their home is their responsibility. We are here to help them and guide them, to assist them in answering their questions. But in regards to going in and working on customer-owned equipment, that's not our role or responsibility.
But you do that, right? You provide that service?
If we are requested by the customer to come in to do a service call, yes, we do that currently.
You would do a check of all there.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Gazzola asked some of my questions, but I just want to ascertain that the 2 leaks that were found outside, were they at a level that was considered dangerous?
None of the leaks that we found were considered dangerous or harmful to the residents.
So they wouldn't spark, they wouldn't explode, even if there was a flame nearby?
That's correct.
In terms of the responsibility internally, I understand that there's an opportunity for the homeowner to purchase the service call, and if they have more than one gas appliance, would the fee cover the review of all of those things?
In order to do each appliance properly, there'd be a charge for each appliance. There are contractors out there that will group them together. So if you have a range, a clothes dryer, a fireplace, they'll group it in but give you a reduced rate after the initial call because they're already there. The initial charge is for them to come to your home. Once they're there, then it's just a time-based service.
So what is our policy on that? If you're charging, I think you said 100 to 120, Mr. Malcolm, on the call, and so that is for one appliance to review?
That's for one appliance. If we were to do an air conditioner, that's typical what residents are asking for, is to have their air conditioning and furnace done at the same time. We have a price for just doing the furnace or a price to do both the air conditioning and the furnace. If we start getting into fireplaces or barbecues, then it would be a time-based that we would add on, depending on how long the technician would be there.
And the review that was done in Ward 5, was that done on the furnace or a bunch of appliances? What was done there?
It was all done within the home, so it covered all the appliances. So utilizing a measuring device to determine if there was any gas within the home around the gas appliances.
So that was quite a comprehensive look at every property that asked for that.
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Malcolm, could you just elaborate for me on what you just said? If Kitchener Utilities takes care of my furnace, which they do, and they come to my house to inspect the furnace once a year, I believe it is, they're just inspecting the furnace, not other gas appliances. Is that correct?
Through the chair, it depends on what the customer is requesting. If they're asking just for a furnace check, that's what we will do.
Okay. And what does Kitchener Utilities do in way of educating the public, believe it or not, firstly on the fact they should get their gas appliances inspected once a year? What do you do?
Basically, we have a number of vehicles out in the community. We have face-to-face discussions with customers at different events. We have bill inserts within the utility bill. We also advertise on the Weather Network and other media outlets. Those are the main focus of our education. This inspection allowed us to speak to 300 residences in this ward to answer any of their questions in regards to their role and responsibility in natural gas appliance usage as well as maintenance. We also did in this fall attend a number of community events where we reached out to approximately 10,000 residents in the city of Kitchener with the fire department and Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro in regards to safety and the use of natural gas within their home.
Okay, thank you. My last question, the ticket that you held up there that is hanging from the gas turn off, turn on, if there is work being done in the house, let's say by a floor refinishing contractor, you don't know if they are, presumably they're turning off the gas. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we wouldn't know what that contractor is doing. We would not have an idea, no.
And whether that involves tampering with the tag or anything else, you wouldn't know?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah, I don't have any, I already asked my questions. I just quickly want to make a comment. I just want to thank council and thank staff. Staff for implementing and council for allowing this program to go forward. I think it was really important for the community under the circumstances. And I think, you know, at least there's 300 people or homes that feel better about living in the community now. And I think with the word getting out, I think the positive that we can take away from this is that that everyone needs to get their gas appliances checked. And I think that that was clear to the people who uptook the program. And I think with the number of the immediate attention that was getting, I think that's the important point that we have to stress, is that everyone should get their gas appliances checked on a yearly basis. And, you know, with the numbers that were shown, you know, you won't be surprised to see that there may be a minor leak in your home and get that taken care of. And then again, you can feel better about your home. So again, I just want to thank staff for really working hard in implementing the program and council for allowing it to move forward.
That's all that we have, Mr. Malcolm. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the other information items, if you have any questions, just please, do you have anyone who will have any particular questions? There's a few questions? Okay. Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Actually, just a comment on the information report on Highway 7. I'm happy to see it here. I just wanted to state publicly, it looks as though from the map, and I guess staff can confirm it at this point now, that they are planning an interchange on-off ramps. It looks like it's just outside of the boundaries of the city of Kitchener. Is that accurate? actually, it's moot. I don't actually need a response on that. But my concern here is that I want to state in the record is not only how the City of Kitchener is looking at planning for the future in this area, but also the implications of what could happen with the Township of Woolwich just on the other side. Obviously, there's been some concerns with Waterloo, where I guess there's a proposal for a Walmart, and there's also been concerns with the casino. So I guess I just want staff to be cognizant. For example, if Woolwich were to drop a shopping center on the other side of the city limits there, how would that impact the City of Kitchener and that community? So again, just a comment, but I want it on record.
Councillor Galley-Seelock?
Yeah, I was remiss in the last report. I'd actually like to bring a motion forward that the report just be received.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez?
Did we not have
Sorry,
to complete that?
Yeah,
I was going to say.
can we vote on that and then
All right.
move on to the...
Sure.
So just that the natural gas inspection report be received.
And with that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's carried. Okay, Councillor Fernandez, you have a...
Yeah, on the EAB update, I guess I'm, now that we see, of course, that, and it's no surprise that 9 of the city's wards are infected, I want to really understand, there hasn't been anything done, and I know that we had the storm in August that we had to deal with the tree cutting, but I don't, and I haven't seen a real push to try and partner with citizens. I've had a lot of citizens who are saying, we really would like to, we would have liked to have purchased a tree and put something in the fall. I think that would have definitely assisted in getting some trees already into the boulevards. I realize that it may look like preferential treatment, but I think if the person is willing to upfront the cost, and I believe Councillor Singh was also talking to me about seeing that forward. So I wish we could see some direction from staff to allow citizens to do this, because I think it would definitely get some trees in the ground. It may almost be too late now. The ground hasn't frozen over, but I don't want to take a risk of people planting trees and then coming back to us and saying, it died over the winter. But by the time we get our tree stumping done, we could be into a hot season again.
Mr. Whitmer, you have a reply to that comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Staff have been working internally to develop a donation program. What we were doing is trying to determine or to ensure that we had no issues with CRA, Canada Revenue, as part of that process. I think we're pretty close to developing that. It's not that difficult. We just need to make sure that it's proper for them. Because the trees are on private property, which is the city property, it's not on private property in the context of the resident, then it's a lot simpler. It's public property, sorry. As far as planting is concerned, we chose not to pursue any planting this year due to availability of species. At the end of the season, the quality of the trees is not as good as you get at the beginning of the season, and we have a planting plan that we're dealing with staff, and a tender will be going out early spring, so that we have the first spring planting, because we only plant in spring and in fall. The stumping that's going to be done will coincide with that work, so it's been completed as well for those trees that have been removed.
So if we don't see a sudden onslaught of snow, will we go into a winter works program where we can see some stumping happening during the winter?
Yes, that's correct. We actually have staff that typically would be involved with our sports fields that have been mobilized to pick up the remaining amount of stumps that are done in Ward 4. There were 90 trees that are removed in Ward 6 that we're completing, as well as catch up on the other parts of the city that are not impacted by EAB that have been waiting for at least a year for that stumping being done as well. So they are on it part of this fall. If we don't get a lot of winter, then we'll be accelerating our removals program as well as what we did last year and try to maximize the resources that we have internally.
Okay. Are we struggling with managing this because Mr. Schmidt has been seconded into another department and we're just dealing with one urban forester right now?
I don't think that's that's the issue. I think it's just a matter of we haven't pushed the issue with meeting with the neighborhoods. We met in Ward 6 just in this past month, and we had some discussion with them to give them an update. And now we are pursuing the work of removals over the winter and next year.
Okay, then I can give that reply to residents who would. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and with all that, I conclude our Community Infrastructure Services Committee meeting. And I'll bring that to you, Mr. Mayor.
Visitor?